Chapter 5: The Struggle for Equal Rights. March on Washington. The fight for equal rights continued. Protests were happening all across the South. Violence against peaceful protesters was caught on video and shown on the news. Many people were hurt, including children. John escaped death several times, but he didn't let that stop him. He continued to peacefully protest. He was arrested 24 times. People saw that he was a leader. In 1963, he was asked to become chairman of the SNCC. John was just 23 years old. He felt emotional about all the violence in the country. He worried about his safety and the safety of his friends. Still, he agreed to lead the organization. Later that year, an organizer named A. Philip Randolph came up with the idea of a march in support of jobs for Black Americans. He wanted to make a big statement. He asked 5 other civil rights leaders for help: Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, and John. The group became known as the Big Six. John was the youngest member. The march was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. On August 28, 1963, about 250,000 people gathered under the Lincoln Memorial to hear the speakers. Dr. King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Before Dr. King went on, John gave his own speech. At first he was nervous, but then he spoke strongly. He felt hopeful that things would change. The good feelings didn't last long. Just 2 weeks later, a bomb in a Birmingham church killed 4 little girls. When Dr. King spoke at their funeral, 8,000 mourners came together. Then in November, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It was a huge loss, and the country was in pain. Kennedy believed in equal rights for everyone. He had been working on a civil rights bill. The new president, Lyndon Johnson, followed his lead. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed the next year. Bloody Sunday. John wanted to learn about how other Black people around the world were working to get equal rights. In 1964, he went to Africa to learn about how Black people there were struggling. Their fight was different, but there were many similarities. John learned a lot and felt ready to fight more in the United States. He and the SNCC team decided to focus on voting rights next. Though Black people had the right to vote, it was very hard for them to register. Sometimes they had to take unfair tests. Other times they were met with threats and violence. John knew that until Black people could vote for leaders who would fight for them, nothing would change. On March 7, 1965, John helped organize a march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. John knew he could get arrested, so he prepared a backpack with a few things he might need in jail, like a book, a toothbrush, toothpaste, and an apple, and an orange. Dr. King was supposed to lead the march, but he was delayed, so John led it. He walked over the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma in a peaceful line, but the police were waiting on the other side. The police attacked. The protesters were beaten with clubs and sprayed with tear gas. John was hit in the head and fell to the ground, bleeding. Meanwhile, reporters recorded what happened. The attack appeared on TV that night. This event became known as Bloody Sunday. The videos caused the nation to respond. After Bloody Sunday, leaders came to Selma to march. On March 21st, Dr. King led about 25,000 protesters from Selma to Montgomery. John was still healing from his injuries, but he marched too. They walked 50 miles over 5 days. This time, it worked. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law. Black voters' rights were now protected.